9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world. Coming to you all the way from Ireland. It's Sandie Byrne.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Life After Life with me, Sandie Byrne. And I'm sitting here very jealous because it's a cold March day here in Ireland, and I am talking to a lady in Sydney, Australia, who is wearing a very light summer top and is complaining about the heat down there. So I would like to welcome Gabrielle Pimstone to the Life After Life podcast. She's laughing at me.
I actually can't introduce myself because I'm laughing at you. I am complaining. I'm not complaining about the heat. I'm complaining about the humidity. I don't find it dry heat.
There's a difference. We would take a little bit of heat over here at the moment.
Thanks for having me. It's really wonderful to be here, and hi to your listeners.
An absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. And so one thing that I always ask every guest, Gabrielle, if it's okay with you, I ask people about their background, okay, so that the listeners can understand that, you don't have to be working in the holistic area from the moment you leave school in order to be meaningful and helpful and all that kind of stuff. So do you mind if I ask about your background, Gabrielle? What did you do before you got into the woo-woo?
I did a kind of woo-woo before I got into the real woo-woo. I could probably start by answering the question just going back a little to when I was a child, because I always had an interest in psychology and spirituality. And when I was 9, my father passed away. And it was obviously a very painful time. And about a year later, I spoke to my mum about, going to see a medium. She said she didn't want me to do that. And so what I did was I just put spirituality, into the back burner. And I focused on my other passion, which is psychology and, the human psyche. And it was a no-brainer. When it came to going to university, I decided to become to study psychology, went into organizational psychology and stayed there for 27 years. But I had like a constantly nagging feeling behind it. I was having a few spiritual experiences that I pushed aside. And then 2020 came. And it was a combination of the pandemic and the isolation of the pandemic. But also I was in this senior leadership role in a bank of all places. And my job was just soul-destroying. I was actually deeply distressed. My anxiety, which has been with me all my life, was front and center. I wasn't sleeping, and I woke up on a Sunday morning and I had this real pit in my stomach. It was more than butterflies. It was a sense of impending doom. It was really startling, and I kind of went inwards, sat in my bed, and what is this about? And realized that it was because the next day was Monday. And I had to go to work, or I had to dial into Zoom and engage with people, and I just was not in that headspace. Took myself off for a walk, listened to a great podcast, and there was a woman talking about her own anxiety and really feeling like she'd been trapped in a spiritual prison her whole life, always waiting for the other shoe to fall. And that was my story, and I made a decision that day. I resigned from that job. I didn't leave the corporate space yet. I spent 18 months training up as an energy master and kind of transitioning out of the corporate world. And that's really how I came to be here. And it's also worthwhile saying that in 2020, when I was in such a trough, my tried and tested psychological methods no longer worked. I was looking for another modality, and that's when I stumbled across energy.
Wow. And I love that because I always feel, and I've said it on the podcast before, that there's always a catalyst that brings people back to their spirituality. Okay. And for you, it was the COVID pandemic, and I'd imagine a lot of people, because didn't the word pivot, didn't that become like an overused word during the lockdowns? Everybody was pivoting. Yeah. So you
and,
pivoted.
and unprecedented. It was an unprecedented moment, and I pivoted. That's exactly right.
I love that. So now you're working in energy, okay? And that's why you're here. And okay, so this might be a difficult question to answer because we've all heard about energy healers, okay, and energy practitioners. Now you call yourself an energy master and coach, okay? So is there a difference between an energy practitioner, an energy healer, and what you do with the energy master and coach? Could you explain a little bit?
Yes, sure. And it's a great question. Look, I've always been a coach for, 2 decades because I was in psychology in corporate, and I'm an accredited coach, and it's a specific modality, it's a specific skill set. So the difference between what any coach, regardless of what your content is teaching people how to take steps forward in their lives, how to resolve problems, how to step into their potential. It's a forward-moving process, and it's done through a process of inquiry, deep listening, and sometimes holding up the mirror. So that's what a coach is. Now, as an energy healer is, as you know, somebody will come to me, they've got a block, they want to have a couple of sessions, and I do a form of hands-on healing using advanced sacred geometry to release their blocks. We have a bit of a debrief afterwards, and they go away and their life feels better. If somebody enrolls in coaching with me, I overlay the energy lens with the coaching modality, where I'm teaching people how to look at themselves differently from the vantage point of energy blocks. I'm also teaching people how to master their energy, and I've got a 5-step process where I help people understand their energy, protect their energy, clear their energy, maintain their energy, and optimize their energy. So there's more of a kind of a teaching process, I guess, involved. So I'm awakening people to the modality, and what I'm doing is I'm opening up and expanding the energetic capacity so that they can house higher frequencies and advance their lives. But I'm teaching them how to do it for themselves as well.
Ah, so I get it. So I'm going to break that down a little bit because I have to have things simple. I'm just that kind of logical thinker. So if I was to go to a healer, they'd do that little bit of healing and send me on my way until I get blocked again, and I'd come back, whereas you would give me the tools I need to do it for myself in the future. So that's a big difference, and it's an important difference to point out because we all want to be self-sufficient, don't we? We 100% do.
Yes, I think that's true, but it's interesting how many people would prefer me to do it for them. It's quite interesting. A lot of people just feel like it's too esoteric, but there are an equal number of people who do want that self-sufficiency. I think it is a human driver. I think independence, freedom, control, will, all of self-will, those things make us up as human beings. And I think, when I was working in corporates, my approach, I wasn't like a typical consultant. I always worked therapeutically. It's the client who owns the problem and the solution to the problem. So I was always capacitating my clients to solve their own problems, and I've brought that into my energy practice because who wants to keep going back and paying someone to do it for them when you can learn some very nifty tools and do it yourself?
I'm actually writing that down because that is a powerful statement that you just made. I don't know, did you realize it? But that the client owns the problem and the solution. Because as you say, so many people want you to do it for them, but you have to own it at some point. And that's huge. That really is huge. Thank you for that, because that, to me, that just made sense as soon as you said it, So we have to own it ourselves. And,
yes, we do, and that's where change happens.
That is where change happens.
And,
I was just looking at, now, I was saying to Gabrielle that I don't necessarily over-research people before podcasts because I like conversation to flow. So I'd like to think that maybe I'm asking the questions that people are thinking of while they're listening, But I did see that a big thing that you do is to assist people who are in or on the cusp of change, but in need of that crucial nudge forward. And isn't that what everybody's looking for? It's almost like so many people are waiting for for somebody to tell them that it's okay, go for it.
You know, I think you said the word a little earlier. You spoke about the word catalyst. I think you used that word earlier. And people often need a catalyst to make the changes, because as human beings, even though we desire growth and change, that is an archetypal human need, we also desire stability at the same time. So the comfort zone keeps us there. And one of the things that I've learned in my 27 years working in corporate is that one of the most challenging parts of change is getting off the starting blocks. And that is a huge focus of the work that I do. And sometimes it takes a few sessions to get people off the starting blocks. And there are different ways you can do that. But it's, that's also human nature, is to just kind of stay in the comfort zone.
Yeah, totally. The status quo is comfortable, isn't it?
It really, it's simultaneously uncomfortable and comfortable, because most of the times, there are things in our lives that we really can't stand anymore, and yet, there's that beautiful Rumi quotation: "Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open?" And it's, the prison is not a comfortable place in many ways, but I think for me, and I can talk from our own experience, Sandie, but also the people that I've worked with, I think a lot of the nudge that people need forward is because we are very attached to our identity. And change often requires a shift in self-concept, a shift in self-identity. We got to let go of labels that have become part of us, familiar roles, familiar language. And so that, for me personally, and a lot of my clients, is the biggest challenge. And it's a re-script of at an identity level. That's the most difficult thing, but not impossible.
Not impossible. And that's what people want to hear, isn't it? They want to hear that it can be done. And that's so important. You can't get off the starting block if you don't believe that change is possible.
Exactly. And what I talk about, that for me is an element of being in a non-resistant energetic state. So I've got to get people to, sometimes that's the other challenge, from a resistant energetic state, which encompasses belief like it's never going to happen for me, or change is impossible, I'm too old, or whatever, to a non-resistant state where you believe in the possible. And I can tell you, if I let go of my anxiety, which was crippling at the age of 50, anyone can do it. Anyone.
Yeah. I'd like to think so. Well, I was diagnosed with PTSD several years ago myself, and I think, like anybody else who has been, whether it's PTSD, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, we all have days, don't we, where we don't want to get out of bed, and there's always going to be that residual energy left in us where we think, I just can't do it today, and that's a block. Which actually brings me on to the next question. How do people know? I mean, I want to get into the intricacies of talking about how energy healing works. But, first of all, how do people know that they're carrying blocks?
Well, I think before I answer that, I want to go back to what you said. It's a nice segue into the answer. But you said something about residual energy that's left from traumatic events.
Yes.
That is how blocks form. And those events can happen in our childhood. They can happen in utero. They can happen to our parents or grandparents and get passed down to us from generation to generation.
Generational.
But actually, generational. What an energy block is it's, an event happens, or we experience something and we put meaning on it. And there's an energetic frequency around that doesn't go away. You've got to transmute energy. It doesn't go away or release it. So if you're not working with it, it gets trapped in your energetic body, sometimes in your physical body. And what happens over time is, as more things pile on and strengthen your beliefs and the stories and all the things you told yourself from that event, the block goes deeper and deeper and it becomes more prolific. And now, how do you know that you've got a block? In my experience, is where you've got ongoing patterns that you can't break through. So the clue that you've got a real deep block is habitual patterns, cycles, things that keep happening to you that you can't explain, you can't break out of. And that to me is often the clue.
Wow. I'm going to give you
I'll give you an example.
I'm going to give you one, right? And would you say this is a block or a fear? Maybe a fear is a block, right? But I don't hold secrets. People know a lot about me, so I'm not I'm not afraid to talk about my life. So most people know that I don't have a relationship with my dad. My dad is a gambler. Okay, and we lost our house and we lost all our money and everything like this. Okay, so I throughout my life have had issues with money. I've made a prisoner of every single penny, throughout my life. I've done without things so that I could have a little bit in the bank in case something went wrong. And then I'll go through other phases where I spend everything, So someone said to me not so long ago that I have a block when it comes to money. Is that a block?
Yes, it sounds like it is. And what it sounds like, because energy blocks can present in two different ways. They can either present as a deficiency or as an excess. Okay. So, so I'm not reading your energy. I'm not in state at the moment, but I'd go in and I'd find out where it is. But it sounds like when you're holding your money tightly, that's the kind of the constricted version, versus when you're spending like a drunken sailor. That's also a block. That's just kind of expressing itself in a different way. Sounds very much like, it's unsurprising that you developed a block around this. Yes, but I would definitely work, and I imagine if I worked with you, there would be some. I would pick up stuff in your root chakra, which is our survival basic needs being met. That's the area where that energy gets trapped. I'm not sure where the root would be, but that there would certainly be some stuff going on around survival issues.
And that just makes so much sense, because my sister and I obviously were raised by a single mother, from when I was very young. And, there wasn't enough money to go around. I was raised like a lot of people throughout the 1970s and 80s. Yeah. There just wasn't money for you. Just about, you ate and you had clothes and that was it. You didn't have money for the nice things in life. And I think like a lot of people who would have been raised the same way as I was in social housing with a single mother, and all that kind of stuff, we've a tendency to spoil our own children, don't we? We want them to have the things that we didn't have, when we were growing up. This is funny, and I have to say it to you because people will understand. There was a toy here when I was growing up in the 1980s called Mr. Frosty, where you could make like little slush puppy drinks for yourself. Did you have that in South Africa? Because Gabrielle's originally from South Africa, and I wanted this Mr. Frosty toy for years and years and years, and I never got Mr. Frosty from Sandie. Sandie never brought Mr. Frosty. So I was so excited when I had a child to buy Mr. Frosty for my child, and he never looked at it once, and I was so disappointed.
That's I mean, we're laughing, but I imagine that would have evoked something in you, because your dream wasn't his dream. But that's actually a good sign, because that neediness that you had clearly hasn't been passed on to him, which is wonderful.
I still have that neediness.
I mean, my blog, talking about personal stories, and I'm also an open book. I went on to a podcast a few weeks ago with somebody who analyzes dreams, and I took a really radical dream to them, and it's out there. So, my father he died when I was 9, and he was sick from when I was 5. So that was the traumatic event in my life.
Of course.
And the expression of my, the block was interestingly, it was anger. I was a rebel. I was raging. And when I really went in to look at it, it was grief and a debilitating fear of loss of control. Now, that's been the block that I have been working with, and it's found expression in so many avenues in my life. Now, there was a lot of work that was done in my heart chakra, which is the seat of love and connection, not only to others, but to yourself. So, we all have these things that we carry through our lives. I mean, I was speaking to somebody on another podcast yesterday. I was telling them the story of somebody that I worked with who had an energy block develop in utero because they weren't a planned pregnancy. So it was a shock to their mum when they were conceived, and there was a major adjustment process. And there was, what happened to that person is when they were born, they were loved, but they went through life and not understanding why they had dysfunctional relationships, where they were clingy, where they were needy, where there was over-dependence on other people and need to be seen, validated. And it came from the womb, which I found a really fascinating example of a block as well.
Yeah. And, people don't realise, and I don't want to get into that debate because everybody has to make their own personal decision, but, that once you're human in the womb, you begin having life experiences. And you have experiences even from the spirit world before you decided to come back and be reincarnated. And you have experiences from past lives, So all of these things come back, and whatever you're supposed to experience, you will experience. But yeah, they can really bring trauma. And if I can go back just a little bit to your grief, because I'm a medium, I deal with grief every single day. I'm not a grief coach, but I meet people who have been grieving. And we don't give ourselves enough time to grieve. We have all these societal things like, okay, well, we'll give them 2 weeks off work and then they'll be back and they'll be fine. Don't we though? We have all these things and you're just expected to get on with it. Okay, well, he was buried now 3 weeks ago, so you're fine now. Come on, let's go. And from my own experience, and I had that from my parents' separation and everything when I was younger. But I talk a lot on my podcasts and to people about my granddad, who was like my father figure, because he was a widower himself, and but he came to live with us when he got cancer, and he died when I was 14. And just 10 weeks later, another person that I talk about he was technically my uncle, but we were raised more like brother and sister. And he was killed in a motorcycle accident just 10 weeks after my granddad died of cancer. And we grieved so hard over Kevin's death. 20 years later, I almost had a breakdown because I'd never grieved for my grandfather. And this is something that I never realised could happen. But I'm always warning people, deal with your grief now. Don't let somebody rush you past it or tell you what's normal, because there's no normal when it comes to grief. And, for those who can't see, Gabrielle is nodding her head because, obviously to lose your dad at 9 years old, that's traumatic in itself. But to have seen him sick for 4 years, and then people think, and we always say kids adapt and get on, don't we? But you're going to tell me different, aren't you? Because
if people can't see me, they can't see that I'm actually tearing up as you talk, because I'm very moved by what you're saying. And, I think there's so much truth in we don't give ourselves enough time to grieve. And I'll share, because I never did, because I just became angry. And my childhood sweetheart, I met him at 11 and I fled out the house, and, I had a loving mother. I still have a loving mother, but, I was raging and I was avoiding. But what actually happened, I reframed my relationship with grief 2 years ago, because I had to rescue cats that were ancient when they passed away. They were like 21. And I was really close to them. And when the first one, they passed away within 6 weeks of each other 2 years ago. And when Saturn passed away, she was the first. When Saturn passed away, I was bereft. I didn't get out of bed for 4 days, and on the 5th day, I thought, like, I've actually got to go. I've got to get up. Let me go have a cup of coffee. I got into the car, went to my local coffee shop, couldn't get out, went back into bed. But what I did once I could actually get out of bed was I took myself down to my local beach. There's this beautiful walk there, and I said to myself, I'm going to just feel my feelings. I'm going to feel my grief, and I was terrified to feel my grief. And I did an exercise, and I timed it. It didn't go in timing it, but it was 17 minutes. The whole thing from beginning to end took 17 minutes. I went into my grief. I wept on that boardwalk. I cried. I metaphorically held my inner child. I was in deep, deep grief. I felt fear. I felt sadness. I felt everything. And I popped out of it 17 minutes later, and I felt bliss. Oh. And I realized from that experience that the human psyche, or even physiologically, the body can't hold on to the intensity of grief for longer than a short period of time. And so if you can dedicate, in my case it was 17 minutes, dedicate 17 minutes of your life to feeling the feeling and moving through it. That's all it takes. I mean, I did feel sad afterwards, but that the heaviness and the weight of the grief really lifted. Because what happened is I realized that my grief was an expression of my love for my cat. And that was like, that's beautiful. I actually experienced the beauty and the kind of the gentleness of grief as well.
Oh, and I love that old quote, I don't know who said it originally, but grief is the price that we pay for love. And that's kind of what you were saying there. Now, I'd imagine, and I'm not belittling because I've lost animals before and I still cry over my animals, but could it take more than one 17-minute session? Like, say if I lost a spouse or something, okay, could I do this maybe every day for 2 weeks?
Yes, because the point is, I mean, for me it took 17 minutes once, and I felt sad afterwards, but I didn't feel that, I didn't ever go back to that same place. So what the principle behind what I'm talking about is the principle of immersion, immersing yourself in the feeling as opposed to avoiding it. Now that could be leaning into something for 2 weeks. You might not be doing a 17-minute walk, but in your own way, really just not escaping, and that's immersion. So I think it's the same principle, and that's what gets you through. And that's what breaks through real deep blocks, because you're releasing, not just emotionally, you're releasing physically, you're releasing energetically, and like thoughts are releasing. It's like a holistic immersion. That's what's going to get you through the process.
So do we all have to go to the beach in Sydney for this now?
Yes.
We're all going to wax
when you get
Absolutely. I should just tell my husband that I've been told I need to go to Sydney. Okay, so we digress, but it's so important that we mention grief, because the majority of people, I think, that listen into these spiritual podcasts, they're grieving. They found us because they're grieving, And let me just say, because it's such a big part of what you do, you don't have to be grieving a person. You can be grieving a lifestyle. You could be grieving, maybe you've been made redundant from your dream job. There's so many things that we can grieve for in life. It doesn't have to just be a person, but we need to let ourselves grieve. Isn't that important to mention?
It's so important to mention, and it goes back to you're grieving a part of your identity that's lost. I've emigrated. I left South Africa and moved to Australia. That's a serious loss, and a loss of identity. I grieved for years. A change of career. This career change I had a few years ago, I grieved it. Initially I was relieved, and then I grieved it. So absolutely, it doesn't have to be a person.
Yeah,
and there are different ways we grieve. There are also different ways we grieve. That's the other thing to say.
It's true.
You don't have to cry. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I always cry. I cry at everything. So.
I also do. It's hugely relieving to cry, but if you feel like you can't cry, there are other ways. Like I've also, I've channeled. Sometimes I channel. I bring, like my cats have come through, my late father, my late grandfather, and the channeling process is a grieving process as well.
Wow. Okay, so while you mention that, let's stick with that for a minute, because I want to know, as a child, what was the first time that you experienced the spirit of your dad after he passed away? Can you remember?
It was much later. It was, I would say, it was about maybe 15 years later. I mean, I was an adult by then.
Okay.
And I was sitting on my bed in my bedroom, and I had like papers on my... No, sorry, that was a different channel. Apologies. I was meditating. It was in the same bedroom. I was meditating. I was sitting next to my bed and meditating. And my father's soul spoke to me. And it was a second. And then I just came out of I couldn't hold it. Like I came out of the state that I was in, and it was lost. And it was literally a split second, and I couldn't make the words out, but I knew intuitively Dad was talking. Dad's soul. It was here. It was in my right ear, and it was a sense of communication. But I didn't, because I didn't, I was scared. I lost it. And then I had an experience, same room, maybe a few months later. It was all in the same time period, where I was lying in bed and I felt my bed dip. And it wasn't a negative feeling. It felt like Dad was with me. The presence was kind of weighing down on the bed, and I just turned my light on and I kind of got out of that state. So it happened a few times, but I wasn't ready for it.
No, and that's the thing. And, I say that to so many people, because, the amount of people that tell me, like you just said, you felt the bed dip, like someone sat on it, okay? The amount of people that feel this, and the amount of people as well that you just might be going around your everyday business, and all of a sudden you might see a shadow come into your peripheral vision, okay, or an energy. And the first thing that we do is we get a fright. It's like if someone walked into the room and we weren't expecting them, okay? We get a fright. And the minute you get the fright, you close your energy down. And then you lose the connection, which is obviously what happened. So were you able to go back at a later point and make a meaningful connection with your dad?
Interestingly enough, not my dad, but I've had my cats. Funnily enough, it was incredible how I channeled them, and my late grandfather. And they've come through various spiritual senses, like that feeling when of being communicated to was clairaudience, right? That feeling of like the bed moving was like clear, like I just felt like, I think it's tangential, I don't know what it is, but it's the feeling, okay? Then I've had my grandfather come to me through smell. I was lying in bed, and now I'd opened up myself to spirituality, and it was like, I don't know, 7 a.m, and I smelled my grandpa Mark, and he was with me. It was actually amazing, and I just stayed just imbibing the smell, and it stayed with me. It's difficult to tell in these moments because time, I don't know if it constricts or expands, but something happens to time. But I imagine it was probably about a minute. So I stayed with it, and then I could no longer smell it. And then, I had clairvoyance. I've got a photo of it. One day my cats came to me in a beautiful light green orb that just hung suspended below my ceiling fan, and I took a photo. It's beautiful. I also had a feeling of them one morning. Both of them were suspended above my bed. The one was in front of the other, and they were protecting me, and that lasted for a long time. I mean, I don't know exactly, but minutes and minutes and minutes. And I've heard them as well, like shortly after both of them passed, I'd hear their voices. I actually heard the one scratching on the flap of the cat flap, you know.
Yeah.
I really heard it. And so it comes in different ways and through different spiritual senses. And it's in the last few years that I've been able to really open myself up to that.
Oh, wow. I love it. And I mean, we could talk about, you know, spirit all day, but just when you're talking about your cats, because I'm also a cat person, I had a lady on the podcast a couple of weeks ago who's a cat whisperer, you know, and she talked about, about how, you know, that animals can come to us several times in our lifetimes, you know, as we need them and in different forms and all this kind of stuff. So you should definitely listen to her. She is just amazing. Okay. But I've been talking to my cats about it. I have 2 cats. I've been talking to them about it ever since I spoke to her, and I feel like they're listening to me. You know, I feel like they're taking in every word. You know, cats, well, animals in general are so powerful, and they provide so much comfort and support to us as human beings. Not only, and you'll know this, not only in this lifetime, but also in the next lifetime. So, you know, they have a tendency to meet us. Yeah. I actually read for somebody earlier today. I beg your pardon, Gabrielle. I'm sorry I'm talking over you. But I actually read for somebody earlier today who was reunited with a beloved pet in the spirit world. And they had a traumatic passing from this life. Very young person who was reunited with a childhood pet and was so happy to have this childhood pet with him in the spirit world. Yeah. It's so powerful. The connection
that is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That they are deeply connected to us, and cats get maligned a lot, but they've got a lot of love for humans. I'd love the name of that person, the cat whisperer, if you don't mind, afterwards.
100%. Yeah, I will definitely send that on to you. So animals, and you know, I could talk to you about the spiritual things. Just before we move on from the spiritual and go back to the energy. So when you're working with people, now you work with people both online and in person, don't you?
Actually, mainly online. If people live in Sydney, I always say to them, let's do it online. And somebody said to me a while ago, they insisted on coming, and I landed up doing a session in the next room, in another room, because a couple of things. I'm actually working on you, and I'm not touching your body, but you can feel if I'm working on your third eye. You can feel it, and it's distracting for you, and it's, you know, I'd rather you be in a space which is very open. And also what I did after that was I had to take my smudge stick, my sage, and sage my house, because, you know, when you're releasing other people's energy in your home, you want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So I've got sacred geometry that I use that allows me to bring the person, doesn't matter where they live, bring their energetic body in front of me, and that's what I work with.
Yeah. And it's also important for people to understand, because I work exclusively online, that them feeling comfortable in their own space is such a big part of any kind of, you know, whether you're doing healing, whether you're reading somebody or whatever, they have to feel comfortable. And, you know, I used to read people in the house years ago, and people used to drive a long way to get readings, you know, and they might have to get in the car and drive an hour or 2 hours or whatever home. And they're apprehensive. They're sitting in a reading, worrying about the drive home and listening to the rain and the wind outside. And I'm just saying, stay at home, have your cup of tea or your cup of coffee in front of you, and let me just read you, you know. And then you're at home in the middle of it. Yeah. So it's the same with you. So,
yes.
Okay. So let me ask. Okay. Now, I don't know, is this possible for you to get across in just a couple of minutes? How does energy healing work? How does it work? Okay,
so there are different modalities. I can only talk about my own modality, which is that I use advanced sacred geometry. Do I need to explain what that is? I'm not sure if your listeners will know what that is.
Yes.
Yeah. So just take a look at nature. You've got these divine, perfectly proportioned patterns everywhere in nature. If you look at a snowflake, if you look at the center of a flower, if you look at the markings on a tortoise, they're just divine patterns and shapes. And we've also got them inside us as human beings. You know, our DNA is spiral in shape. cells are spherical in shape, and these aren't there by coincidence. They've been called the divine language of God. Actually, Galileo called them the language God used to design the universe. They're everywhere, and each of them houses different energetic frequencies. And so what we do is we use advanced sacred geometries, which with particular frequencies to heal specific things. So that's what I use. How I do it is without going into too much of the mechanics, but as I've already said, I've got geometry that allows me to bring the person's energetic body in front of me. I always start by clearing and balancing the chakras. I think most energy healers do that. So most people will know that we've got lots of chakras, but we tend to focus on 7 primary ones. I also focus on the ears, and I go in and I read the energy that way. Now, as I'm clearing out and rebalancing the chakras, I'm always looking for the root of the block. Where did this start? And I've got sacred geometry that allows me to do timeline healing. So I go back into the person's past. And depending on what I feel, I go, it could be just to childhood sometimes, I've gone into the wounds. Sometimes I have to go into the karmic grid because I get a feeling that this is about karma, and I've got to go and check whether I can clear the karma around this. But so for argument's sake, I'm doing someone's healing, I pick up something in the throat chakra, it leads me to somewhere on their timeline. I go in and I've got this psychic intuition where I can read and understand, sometimes in broad terms, sometimes quite granularly, what has happened. I release the block from there. Go back, I clear the chakras again, just make sure everything's spinning in the right direction, same size. And then when people come to, we then talk about what happened. I often say to them, there's always a debrief. What did you feel? What did you sense? And I tell people they need to just, lie back, but pay attention to thoughts that come into your mind, colors, images, patterns you see, sensations. We talk about that. Sometimes people have transcendent experiences, sometimes not. And then I talk about what I worked on, and that's where the conversation opens. And then I always leave them with a to-do, something they can do to help them. So that's it in a very broad nutshell. But what I'm doing the whole time is I'm bringing in sacred geometry to different, like, for example, if I pick something up in the throat, I will bring in a particular sacred geometry to deal with that particular issue. And there are different ways that you can bring in sacred geometry. People often say, what are you doing? You can build the geometry in your mind's eye, which is what I do. And when you're advanced, you can feel into the energy immediately. Sometimes in the beginning, I used to trace it, and then you either can leave it in your field, put it around you, or you could even put it into your body and expand it to amplify the potency of the geometry. And what the geometry does is we're always channeling, when we're healing, we're channeling divine energy. What the geometry does is it's got an intelligence of its own. It allows it houses the energy as opposed to you housing the energy. So as a healer, you can do a lot more, you can house a lot more energy because this is a kind of a divine structure, energetic structure. So, and also it doesn't make you so tired because you're the energy is running through the geometry, not through you. It's like an adapter.
That makes so much sense because, I do a little bit of healing. I don't tend to do so much anymore. But I am always exhausted after it because I do trance healing. So it's not me that does the healing. It's the healer is just using my human body. And it exhausts me. So that sounds like a much better way because you're able to concentrate because it's not sucking your energy. That sounds really, really powerful, And I did read as well that, as well as, you're doing this healing, but you're also giving people practical tips okay, and how to move forward, you know. And one thing that you said, and it just stuck with me, okay, right at the end of my 40s now, at the moment, and you know, you say that it's never too late to make meaningful life changes, you know, and I love that. And this would be part of the tips, I'd imagine, that you give people, you know, going away from the healing session, is how, you know, how to bring these changes, how to embrace change, because we keep telling ourselves that we're past it, we're too old, or we have children, we can't do this now. Like, we bring this thinking onto ourselves, don't we? How do you get people past that?
Well, you know, you don't have to be an energy master to master your energy, and you don't have to have loads and loads of time. There are things that you can do that are actually quite efficient. I mean, one way to heal your energy, release blocks, is in your sleep, in your dream state. And that doesn't require, I mean, we fall asleep, we dream. What it requires of us is taking a couple of minutes when we wake up to just document, to jot down what came up for us overnight as we slept, and to maybe try and make sense of it. But you don't always even have to make sense of it, because the release happens. So if you're really busy and you've got no time, all you need to do is set an intention, get into a kind of a non-resistant state before sleep, ask a question that bubbles up, and say to your dream, tonight as I dream, help me understand why this is so, or help me understand how I move through this. And your dream will always answer you, always. And that requires little to no effort. It's the most efficient way of healing. But there are other things we can do, and they take a couple of minutes. You know, I'm a big, you know, I live in Australia, so this weather is usually good. I use the elemental energies to give me a boost. If I'm having back-to-back meetings and they're all online and I've got a 10-minute gap, I go into the sun and I sit in the sun. It's transmuting the energy of the fire energy. And I just, you know, I can either just sit there, or I can imagine the sun's rays coming in, cleansing me. There's small things that anyone can do that don't require a lot of time or skill.
I love it. I mean, we don't have that sun here in Ireland, but I'm going to give people I'm going to give people a relatable example, if that's okay. So actually, I have a friend who is a counsellor, and like that, she has back-to-back clients all day long, but she doesn't work at home necessarily. But she told me that during her commute to and from work, every time she stops at a junction, there's very few traffic lights on the Irish country roads, but every time she stops at a junction, you know, or whatever, she lets somebody else out of the car. So she envisages that this client is getting out of the car now. So she's letting that client and all their problems go before she goes home. And then the next time she comes to a junction or a stop, she will let another client out of the car. So she envisages them getting out of the car and walking home, and that they're taking all of their issues with them, because she's not bringing them home with her. So it's kind of the same thing that you were talking about, but we don't have the sun here in Ireland to do it that way. So this is a way that she, that she has devised to let everybody go, you know, at the end of her day. So she's not bringing them home to her children, to her family, you know, and bringing home all the worry and concern. And here, when I used to have people coming to the house, I used to lie awake at night worrying about them, the same as you do. You're nodding your head, I can see it. And I used to envisage people that when I let them out the front door of my home, I always envisaged that they were either carrying a big suitcase or that they had a backpack on their back. So they were taking all of their issues and their problems and their worries and their concerns with them. Because if I didn't view them taking them away with them, then I was up at night worrying about them. You know, and that's why it resonated so much with me when you said at the top of the program that, you know, they own the problem and they own the solution. We can only guide them to a certain extent.
That's right. Yeah. They are carrying their backpack, not you. Yeah. You know, if I can give another example of what you do, saying there's another technique, a little visualization that this might potentially be an example that I give people. If somebody's creating toxicity in your life, and you know you don't have the wherewithal to engage with them or to give them feedback, or there's a way to let them go energetically. So what you do is you imagine there's a bubble or a sphere in front of you, and you imagine them in the bubble, okay? And what you do is you surround the bubble in a particular color, whatever resonates with you. So what's the color of love, compassion, whatever it is. Say it's purple, purple bubble, and then you bring purple light into the bubble and you fill it up and you expand it, and you imagine the person's just being enveloped in this beautiful colored light. And then what you do is you send the bubble off in your mind's eye, and you can watch it go until you can no longer see it, and send it off with love. That's another thing you can do to protect yourself or to cut cords with somebody's negative energy.
I love the
just another example.
That's a good way. And even when now I'm not at all the expert, but just from my own life experiences and having to deal with different things, people can be toxic and we can carry people's energies, but we also have to protect ourselves sometimes from our own energies. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. So I was very unhappy in my last job. Okay, I was unhappy for quite some time. But I had to go to work because we were paying 2 mortgages at the time and we had young children, we needed money. So I couldn't just leave my job. I had to go to work. So I had to devise a system whereby I could survive the day at work because I was miserable. I was one of those people who was crying in the bathroom before, I got dressed to go to work. So I had this system whereby there was actually, as I drove into the offices, there was a speed bump at the gate, to slow people down going into the car park. So when I hit the speed bump and bumped over it, I switched off the at-home Sandie, if you want to call her that, and I switched on the at-work Sandie. And the at-work Sandie was where I didn't connect with people's energies. I just did what I needed to do to get through the day. And then as I was leaving to go home, I bumped out of the speed bump, I switched off the at-work Sandie. It was like an on-off switch, and switched on the at-home Sandie, where I was loving and I was open and I was embracing and all those kind of things. So I had to protect myself at that point. And this was a scheme that I devised. That was the way my mind saw the 2 different me's, So it's not always somebody else's. It's not always somebody else's energy. Sometimes it's ourselves. That's our own worst enemy. And that's the way it was for me at that time. So, we have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. Okay, so we've been through the healing, and I know that it's something, and it's very personal to people. Everybody's been through something. And, people don't want to talk to everybody about, exactly what they've been through. So I will put the link to Gabrielle's website, which actually is I can't even pronounce the word. Generative growth. Is that like one of those words that I can't say? Like, I have a sister who can't say.
That's very bad feedback to me. I'm so sorry. I should have an easy to put. Generativegrowth.com.au.
I can't. Why can't I say that word? But yeah, that's exactly what her website is, and I will put a link in the description box attached. I have a block where I can't say that word. I have a sister who can't say statistics. I think there's just little things that we pick up.
Yes.
Yeah. So and isn't it funny the way like it can come down through the family line and through your life experiences? But do you mind if I ask you before I let you go? Because I did see very quickly and I didn't get time to read it, so I'm hoping that you'll be able to tell us about your 28 days to healing, because you do offer a program which is just 28 days. Can you tell us a little bit about that before I let you go?
I'd love to. It builds on the principle of immersion and how powerful that is for really releasing blocks. And what I've noticed in my own life, other than the 17 minutes experience, but when I've been facing into, real lifetime patterns and challenges and dynamics and blocks, is it typically takes me about 3 to 4 weeks to if I pour loving attention into it and I immerse myself in the feeling and I practice what I know, it takes about 3 weeks to get through it. And so I realized I can teach people this methodology of it's bite-sized transformation. Take a month out of your life. And most people think, nothing happens in a month, but a huge amount can happen in a month. who you are at the beginning of a month can be very different to who you are at the end of it, and that's my promise. So it's 28 days, once a week, in a group context, or if you want, I could do it individually, once a week, plus work in between. And what I do is, it's partly coaching, but I also do 2 energy healings, 2 energy activations to give you that nudge. And you're doing the work in between the sessions, and it's a guaranteed process. Like, you will have released, if not the whole block, its grip on you. And then you've got tools to help yourself going forward.
And I think that gives people hope, because when you say 28 days, I saw 28 days and I thought, like, I have to be honest, I thought, like, what can I change? And like, I know, because I work in the holistic area, we can be a different person when we get out of bed to who we are when we get back into it at night. Things happen in life, they change us. But can we really get past those blocks in 28 days? And when I saw it, I thought, like, it kind of gave me hope, because, I'm like you, I run my own business. I have a family. I'm still doing school runs and school lunches and, all of those kind of things, and washing and ironing and everything else. And, you're trying to fit so much in, to every day. To the thought that I could actually make this change in 28 days, like, it excited me. And I'm definitely going to be one person that's looking at this. I suppose
that's right.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Go on, Gabrielle.
But I just wanted to emphasize that I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting in those 28 days, because I'm going to the root of your blocks. I'm doing 2 energy healings, and I'm doing 2 energy activations where I'm releasing your dormant potential. So that's the nudge. But then it does require commitment. It does require courage to lean in the white space between the sessions. You've got to do the work yourself, and it takes not so much time, but it takes energy. But I give you the tools to do it. And I actually think it's a joyful process, because there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's a beautiful, fulfilling, and energizing process.
So true. And I can hear whistling, and I don't know why I can hear whistling. Can you hear whistling? There's whistling coming across.
You might be channeling.
Yeah, there's definitely. I don't know will it come across on the recording, but there's definitely whistling. I can hear it in the background.
Is it gone? Because really?
No. Yeah, somebody was a whistler. I can hear it. I can still hear it. There's definitely whistling. So did your dad or did your granddad whistle? Who was the whistler?
Grandpa.
Okay, so he's around. He's just letting us know that he's here. I can't wait to see if that comes across in the recording, because I can hear the whistling so clearly. Yeah, so he's definitely with us here tonight. So I just wanted to ask you, just from a logistical point of view, because obviously I'm in Ireland and you're in Australia. So do you have to attend the group sessions live, or can you watch the recordings?
You could do both, but I run them early on a Monday morning, which is Sunday evening Ireland time. I've kind of worked out a time.
Yeah.
Yes, I've worked out a time that is before Aussies start work.
Okay.
When Americans and Canadians are like somewhere on their Sunday, and where people in the kind of UK, South Africa region are in the evening, Sunday evening. So it's every Monday morning at a time that I feel is suitable to all time zones. Having said that, everything's recorded, and more than that, I use sacred geometry to hold all of my sessions in a particular frequency, so that when a person accesses them, if they weren't there, they get it at the same energetic frequency as when I was running it live.
Okay, so that's perfect, because I'd imagine, not everybody's going to be able to attend every session live. I personally prefer to attend live, because if I have a recording there, I'll say I'll watch it tomorrow, and never watch it. So that's why I always push myself to do live. But that's great, because Sunday evening is a time where people would be sitting at home and, would have the time to sit down for a group session. That's perfect. Oh my God, Gabrielle, I could talk to you all day, because I just feel like we're on the same.
I could talk to you all day as well.
Yeah,
I
100%.
know, I feel the same. Thank you.
Now I've met your granddad, so I'm good to go. What a lovely man. Okay.
Wow.
So look, thank you so much for your time, and you've explained healing to us in such a clear way. I think I actually get it now. And also, just to remind people, it's never too late to make a change. Okay, I don't care how long you tell me that you're stuck in this rut, or someone tells me that they'll never get past this. You will, because if I can get past stuff, believe me, because I'm so stubborn. If I can get past stuff, so can you. Okay, so definitely have a look at the website, and have a look at this 28 days of healing, and please do give it some thought if you find that you have blocks, because Gabrielle has come across here in the podcast. She's relatable and she's down to earth, and you know what, she's been there. So I think we can all open up to somebody who has been there. Okay, so Gabrielle, thank you so much for your time. I have loved this, and I will be seeing you again in the future. Yeah, okay.
Can't wait for that. I've loved it as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. So guys, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode of Life After Life. So until then, take care and stay safe.
Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world.